Just want to say good morning, everybody. My name is Garfield Jones. I'm with the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about Zero Trust and how AI and machine learning can really be implemented in Zero Trust. This is a conceptual brief. I really think that Zero Trust is kind of a buzzword concept. Everyone's kind of talking about that, but it does have some very good concepts that we need to start implementing so that we start moving forward to a more secure network. Zero Trust, if you're not familiar, 14028, improving the nation's cybersecurity. It's a executive order that has been issued by the president to have agencies start to implement Zero Trust. We're starting to move there. CISA has actually put out a Zero Trust maturity model that we're looking at and trying to improve as we go. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that, but I want to lay the foundation for what Zero Trust is. A lot of people, some of the people I talked to around here didn't know what Zero Trust was. I mean, this is, we always talk about when you're innocent until proven guilty. It's totally opposite in Zero Trust. You're guilty until proven innocent, right? You're looking at setting up. It's very different from the traditional network that we have now, where it's very perimeter based, and there is some trust now, right? But when in Zero Trust, there's very little trust to almost no trust. So when you set up this Zero Trust concept, it's basically you are authenticating, you are authorizing every request to get into your data, right? And that's what we talk about when we say fine-grained control, because every request is being authenticated or authorized to get into your data. That's basically what that fine-grained trust is. The paradigm has kind of shifted because at first when Forrester and all the folks came out, there's like, we don't trust anybody. You can't trust anybody, period. The paradigm's shifted so that when you do let someone in, they build trust. You start to work on. It's a lot like me coming to Vegas, right? My wife, she is not very trusting of me coming to Vegas by myself, right? So she's like, hey, if I don't mess up on this trip, I'm able to build trust. So I'm able to. This is her trust algorithm as we go, right? So as long as I get through this trip, which is only another couple hours, and I get home and nothing crazy happens, I can come back again and I can go to other places. So that's kind of where that my wife's on the Zero Trust Vegas tip right now. So, but let's talk a little bit about AI. So most of you are probably familiar with some of the concepts of AI, but I just want to go through it real quick so we lay the foundation. We have artificial intelligence. We talk about natural language processing, all those things right there. Natural language processing, that's the speech, the text, everything else that can possibly go into natural language processing. To really use those algorithms to understand, what language, how text documents are laid out. Natural language processing, you can find, sentiment analysis, things like that. Expert systems, this is where you're kind of training in how to repair something, how to, so things like that, where you're looking at expert systems. Computer vision, we're talking about, images, being able to find, deep fakes, being able to get data from images. And then the computer speech part, that's where, where you can it's pretty self-explanatory. Where you can talk to text, you can do a lot of things like that. So getting predicting what a person can say in the next word or anything like that. So those are computer speech. And then of course robotics. You've probably seen some of that stuff out there with the exhibits. That was pretty cool. I hadn't seen one of those in a while. I worked for APL and we had the big robot walking around, and that was cool. That was the first version of AI. But robotics, having it learn like a human, that's basically what AI is, right? Having it learn like a human, but being able to see that unforeseen circumstance and be able to address it. That's what the AI portion of it. And then we move over to machine learning, right? So I like to look at this whole as almost like a Venn diagram, I guess you could say. I have automation kind of in the center right there, because a lot of folks, automation is considered part of AI. And then you can go over to, say, deep learning, which is another part of it. And then you can go to machine learning. And then AI kind of encompasses the whole thing, right? Because all these are parts of AI. And so machine learning is another aspect of AI, which is very statistical based, very probabilistic. It can be very decision based at times. So you have supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, and then you have those parts there where you're talking about classification. And I think a couple, most of you might know the first three: the classification, regression, and clustering. The dimensionality reduction. This is more where we're talking about using a training data set, and it's too small, getting some new data in it, and still retaining the features of that training data set. So when you put it into an actual machine learning algorithm, sometimes you lose those attributes, but you're actually gonna get some dimension back with that. So those are some of the things but my speech is not on machine learning. It's on zero trust and machine learning. So let's talk about this zero trust, right? So these are the functional areas, right? You'll see in various aspects of these, right? Some organizations have network as their at the top, right? So when you look at user, most of the architectures have it at user at the top, identity or access management at the top, and then you go down below. Some that I've seen in the research arm have used governance at the top, which I totally disagree with, because I think you have to set these up in order to get to governance, because that's where your policies are, right? You have to know where you're going for all of these to be set up. So as you can see with your user, your device, and network, a lot of my use cases are going to be concentrated on those three. Because if you look at zero trust and trying to set up zero trust, that's where the majority of the problems are going to exist, right? It's going to be up there by the user, the network, and to a certain degree the device. But the other part of it will be at the data part. That's where our data tagging, if anyone does data tagging, I know you guys know what I mean, because it's a pain in the neck. It can be very difficult. So data tagging is also another area where you can talk about use cases there. So we have the automation orchestration. This is why I tell you where machine learning can really start to really rear its head, is that automation orchestration. As we move down into there, I think you get more and more into machine learning and AI. The governance, as far as those policies are concerned, those policies are dynamic, have to be dynamic. And you can't have a person sitting there trying to grant access to all these requests that are coming in. So that's where your machine learning and your AI can really focus. At CISA, we're starting to have more and more research topics and requests for this type of setup. We're not investing, as I always tell people, don't invest in that whole functional structure, right? You start investing in that whole functional structure, good luck. You'll be back on, Indeed or, looking for a Walmart, because you want to invest in pieces of that, get it right, and then move on to the next set, right? Because we don't, and our requests will come in and they'll be like, oh, we want this, we want that, we want this. And I'm like, when do you want this by? Because those pieces have to be done individually so that we can make sure that it operates with our operational environment and our mission environment. We can't keep throwing, millions of dollars on it. We are, stewards of the taxpayers' money, so we have to be very careful with that. So we tend to invest in this very slowly and make sure that we can go to the next phase. A lot of it is in identity and access management. And then I say that the next portion of it that we have the largest investment is in the data portion, because that's where it's called the subject, and you'll see we're basically subjects trying to get hold of resources, and knowing what the resources are. That's where that data, to get access to that data, that's how we're gonna set things up. So I just want to kind of lay that out as far as what Zero Trust is. And then here you look at a couple components of Zero Trust. So this is basically the architecture of how Zero Trust is set up, right? So you have the control plane, and then you have the data plane. In some architectures, you'll see something called a management plane, right? It's more of a cloud-based architecture, as this is. Some of these components, most of these components, you've already talked about and heard in 1,000,001 talks. But one of the components over here on the left side, here left, the CDM system. You may not have heard of that. That's continuous diagnostics and mitigation. It's one of the largest federal programs that's out there. What it does is it gathers a lot of the information from the agencies to make sure that they kind of consolidate in one area, and it's supposed to give it a risk score. What is the risk of this agency being attacked or penetrated by an adversary? And then you look at within the control plane, you have the PDP, and then you have the policy engine, trust algorithm, and the policy administrator. The PDP is basically that decision. It grants, whether you can get access to your resource, right? So it's basically saying, this is, Garfield Jones. I'm going to grant access to. He needs access to some travel information, so I'm going to grant him access based on his how he's built up his trust. Is he going into, everybody knows about Snowden, going into different areas that he shouldn't be going into for his work. This is where that role-based access control comes into play. And if you are in a role that you're not supposed to be in, and you're actually going into something that you're not supposed to do, that is going to tell you, it's going to tell the policy enforcement point, don't let that person in, right? Based on that trust algorithm. Again, I'm talking about my wife right there. That trust algorithm is my wife, right? You've got to build up trust, right? You can't sit there and go, as a HR person and trying to go into R&D parts of the agency. So this is where the control plane really, and it's exactly what it says, controls the decisions that need to be made. The enforcement point sends out, it actually terminates, or it grants that permission right there. So you'll see the subject here and its subject is untrusted until they get the information from the control plane, and then the enforcement point says, okay, let's go, send them in. So that's where we look at it. And that trust algorithm, just going back up to there, that's where the AI can really sit. Because now we're talking about behavior, and we're talking about, how can we get a profile for that individual or that subject? Because we can get all these behavior algorithms. We've been talking with different vendors about their behavior algorithms, right? How can we get different behavior algorithms into to set up our PDP? But there's no optimal way to do this, right? This has to be dynamic. You have to look at it as someplace that has to be changed and has to be updated all the time. So don't look at it as that. CISA, I told you, has a zero trust model. We have we concentrate on these three areas: the identity, the network, and the environment, and the data, because that's where we're looking at for heavily using AI in those areas. Because as I say, although the functional areas has its setup, our focus, because of what we think is actually more of the foundation, is going to be the identity, the access, the network, getting folks to the right place, and then what type of data you need to get them to. So inventorying that data. We're also inventorying that data for other reasons that we can talk about in another talk. But other areas that we're looking at putting in maturity, for our maturity model that's going to come out very soon, because I know I've been working on it with Sean Connolly and John Sims. Those are our foremost zero trust guys. They're the pretty faces that go out. Unfortunately, you got this for today. So we're looking at putting spam and phishing, malicious domain, and then of course, really looking at how we can normalize data for security information, event management, and security orchestration and automated response. So those are the seam and the SOAR parts of it. But those are the pillars that you'll see, especially in the NIST 800-207. That's the publication NIST has put out for zero trust. So we'll just talk about user behavior. Again, where we're talking about user behavior fits in, this is where our behavior model really fits in, is in that PDP. That's where you want to put your behavior model and have it sit in, because it's so important in that. And this, like I said, these are conceptual structures that we put together, because these are some of the use cases that we want to make sure that folks understand when they're trying to set up ZTA. And I got my 1 minute warning, so I got to kind of hurry through. So again, we talked a lot about this, and as far as like the user behavior and setting that up. And then we have I talked a lot about this and setting up the profile here. But I really want to get to here, show you this. This is basically we're looking at setting up our network threat protection and our PEP. So, and this is as you can see, where PEP that subject, it has to be monitored. It has to be dynamic. And then for data, this is our inventory and classification tagging. This is basically what we're looking for as far as how to set up our zero trust model with this. I'll try to finish up as quickly as I can. And I just want to leave you guys with some recommendations here. AI is, everyone seen the exhibits over there, right? AI, machine learning is in everything, right? But we have to evaluate those You know, a lot of times you can't evaluate a vendor AI model because it's just very hard to do that. But here you have to ask certain questions of where there are false positives, false negatives, and you're going to see that when you set up zero trust because you're going to have an increase in false positives, and you're going to have to be ready to deal with that. So I think that's why we set up these models in terms of setting up certain parts with AI machine learning, because you can mitigate those using other aspects of AI machine learning to when you so you don't have those that huge increase or false positive or false negative. So when you implement zero trust, or you're implementing aspects of zero trust, you need to make sure that you monitor those false positives, those false negatives, so that you don't have breaches within your system. So I just want to leave you with that thought. Again, sorry I had to run through, but I probably talked too long. So I don't know. We have time for questions or no?
No.